Greetings, learners. We are now going to be looking at climate and weather. Today we are going to be looking at a particular aspect that will assist you in interpreting the synoptic weather chart. You may have noticed as well that in the past 3, maybe 4 question papers, your question 1, the multiple choice part that's out of 7, usually focuses on the weather station models. So we are going to be looking at the analysis of the weather station model, but the bigger picture should be focusing on your analysis of the synoptic weather chart. Take your pen and paper, because there's a lot that you'll be drawing, and be ready. Let us go, okay? A weather station model will look closer to what you see on your screen now, and it needs you to be able to analyze and interpret. Remember, dear candidates, these are symbols. In other words, these are codes. So you are now going to be looking at symbols that are in a synoptic weather chart and try to bring them to life so that anybody else is able to understand what these symbols mean for purposes of understanding what the weather will be like for the day that is projected. Okay? So let us see where we start. Look at the 28. The 28 can either be on top or be at the bottom. It can be on the left or on the right, it doesn't matter. But the higher temperature that you will see there is your air temperature. Dear candidates, please let us make sure this is not the maximum temperature. That is something else altogether. It is the air temperature in degrees C. Okay? It comes up as 28. But when you interpret that symbol, you must say 28 degrees C. Now, for exam purposes, if you just say 28, you are never going to score a mark. If you are going to say 28 degrees, you are never going to score a mark. If you're going to say 28C, you're not going to score a mark. We are looking for the complete answer, 28 degrees C, okay? And that is the air temperature. Now, 20 here, of course it can change on another day and be another temperature reading. We are just using 20 as an example. That is the dew point temperature. Also, like we did earlier on, in degrees C. Remember, 20 is a symbol. So when you interpret it, it becomes 20 degrees C. Dear learners, this is not your minimum temperature. It is your dew point temperature in degrees C. Now we come to the lever. The lever can be pointing anywhere, but we are just using that one to be able to analyze it and help you to understand. Don't cram this, just understand it. The lever refers to the wind direction. Get that as a principle? Refers to the wind direction, okay? Now here is the attention to detail that I want from you. It points in the direction from which the wind is blowing. In other words, it points into the weather station, okay? So this wind here, let me get my pen. This wind here blows into the weather station. So it comes from X, it is going towards Y, okay? Okay? It points in the direction from which the wind is blowing. So this one then becomes a northeast wind, or you can say a northeasterly wind, because it is from the northeast and it is going towards the southwest. I hope that is clear, dear learners. Okay? Now let's look at the next one. The cloud cover is indicated inside the weather station. It can be in 4th, it can be in 8th, depending on what is used there in terms of the indication. But it's going to be easy for you to understand. Now, the cloud cover indicated inside the weather station. So the more that round part is shaded, it means the more the cloud cover. And again, learners, please be careful. Not the higher the cloud cover, because that now refers to altitude and not to the amount of sky that will be covered by the cloud. Often, this is the most neglected part when you're looking at how to analyze cloud cover. Because you can talk about wind direction and give direction. You can talk about temperature and give units of presentation. But often many learners, many candidates don't give cloud cover in units of presentation. Okay? Let us check on our slide. The units of presentation for cloud cover is the octa, or in plural, you can say octas. So in this case, you can see that 3/4 of that cloud cover are occupied. So it will be 3/4 octas. Okay? At the moment, I would encourage every learner to be able to master that unit, because you never know. Maybe in the forthcoming exam, the examiner may be very strict on, we want the units there. So you need to up your game all the time and be able to play your part so that you get your marks. Okay? Now, I want us to look at this part here, which is the part between the temperatures. Okay? Now, that part there, I have used a symbol that is representing thunderstorms. Okay? But normally, if you understand the weather station model, we would say this is where the type of precipitation is indicated. That means precipitation that will be dominant in the day, or that will be unique for the day. Okay? So in this case, it is a thunderstorm that is illustrated. Remember, there are many more other symbols that can crop up there that you need to master. I will be tackling that further down the presentation. Okay? Now let us look at, basically just about the last part of this presentation. Okay? I'm looking at the levers that you see at the end of that long lever. Okay? The short lines or feathers indicate the wind speed. Remember, this was the long line. So I'm referring now to the short lines. Okay? Now, the longer line will indicate 10 knots, or you can write it in full, 10 nautical miles. This is the one that I'm talking about, 10 knots. Okay? 10 knots. And the shorter line, which is that one, will indicate 5 knots. Okay? 5 knots. So these two lines are talking to you. You have to be able to interpret them. So in this particular example that we have, these two lines will indicate 15 knots. Okay? 15 knots, because it is 10 plus 5. That indicates 15 knots. Now, for enrichment, I'm going to be touching on a few other things. Okay? When you have wind speed that is higher, you can have the 10 knots. You can have the 10 knots. Okay? Let us have the 10 knots there. Okay? There's my pen. The 10 knots there. You can have 20 knots. You can have 30 knots, 40 knots, but we don't really have 50 knots. Okay? 50 knots will be substituted by a flag that will be shaded in black. So that is for 50 knots. Okay? Another tiny example that I want to give that will enrich you is sometimes you have a lever like that. And how do you know that this lever is actually different from that one? Okay? Now that is the trick. Because clearly now you can see, because both of them are there, that will be 10 knots and it will be 5 knots. But when you have 5 knots, sometimes we have the lever, but the short one is not put at the end of the long lever. Okay? Sometimes you have the lever and it is slanting, or it is not exactly standing upright. So these two will represent 5 knots. Lastly, on this particular part of interpreting the weather station model, remember that one knot can be interpreted or translated to wind speed in kilometers per hour. Okay? So 1 knot is equal to 1,852 kilometers per hour. Okay? 1,852 kilometers per hour. So if you've got 10 knots there, for you to convert that to kilometers per hour, you must convert it by multiplying 10 knots by 1,852 kilometers per hour, and you'll get the answer in kilometers per hour. Okay? Now, I can go further and deeper, but remember, we are doing the last push, and we're just trying to get you to be ready for the exams. There is more that we can do, but maybe for another day on another platform. Okay? Now, let us now look at other symbols that you need to master. Okay? Let's look at other symbols that you need to master. Let us look at other symbols that you need to master. So, there are symbols that represent precipitation. Look at that column. And there are symbols that represent cloud cover. And there are symbols that represent wind speed. You have to know them because any symbol can be substituted by the other. Okay? So, remember the last weather station model had thunderstorms, but you can easily get, for example, drizzle, which is light precipitation, or fog, okay, which is thicker than mist, okay, 3 lines, thicker than mist. And in our example, we had 3 over 4 octaves or 6 over 8 octaves, but it can easily be substituted by others, okay? So here we have got 8 over 8 or 4 over 4. That is overcast, okay? That is overcast, meaning you have most of your skies covered by clouds. May not be all, as in literally all, but most of it, okay? There are other possibilities like clear skies, meaning you'll have very minimal cloud cover. Does not necessarily mean you will not see a single cloud for the day, okay? Now, be familiar with these symbols, okay? Let us now move to the next slide. A typical example of your exam question from November 2022. And you can see that page is dominated by weather symbols. Now, I'm not going to be talking a lot to 1.1, but I'll be focusing on 1.2 and 1.3. Now, remember, we spoke about the long lever, which is this one, and we said the wind blows into the weather station. So let's look at the question, wind direction, okay? So this one is from the southwest, it is going to the northeast, okay? So it is a southwest wind because a wind is named according to where it comes from, okay? Now let's look at 1.3. Which one? Meaning you've got to choose between A, B, C, or D. Which one of the station models below shows drizzle as a form of precipitation? So you remember drizzle. So your answer will be A. It is just an exemplar of how a weather station model can be asked. Go through your question papers from 2020-2021 up to 2024, your trial exam, and see if they cannot assist you in terms of getting ready for your final exam. Learners, thank you very much for attending this lesson.